The reading for this morning comes from the Gospel according to Luke, the 2nd chapter. Even right here, you might catch a little parallel between the Samuel and Luke. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. Grace and peace to you all in the name of our still-speaking God, who loves us just the way that we are and who loves us too much to let us stay that way. Will you pray with me? May these words of my mouth, may the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for it is you who is our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I am going to let you all in on one of the most poorly kept secrets. Parents lose their kids all the time. All the time it happens. Just like for short periods of time, it happens on an almost daily basis. Just this morning, I heard Michelle asking, "Where's Sailor?" She knows he's somewhere here in this building, but where exactly? I don't know. We just went to Waikiki in the last couple of days to celebrate the many birthdays that we have in December in my family. We were going back to the room from the water park, looking everywhere for Finn. I could not find him. I finally decided, well, he must have gone back to the room, and I just didn't know it. So I go up to the room. He's not there. I turn around and start heading back towards the water park to go look for him, and he's coming down the hallway. "Where were you?" "I thought we were playing another round of hide-and-go-seek in the lazy river. I was hiding in the tube." Apparently he won that round of hide-and-go-seek. But for brief periods of time, parents lose their kids all the time. But I'm going to tell you the story of one time when we lost Grace for a little bit longer than I was comfortable with. This happened when we were living back in Esteline. Grace would have been maybe about 5 years old at the time, somewhere in there. And it was a weekend. Everybody was home. Nobody was working. The kids are just playing, right? And they're playing like kids do in the basement, in the family room, or in their bedrooms, or in the backyard. They're just kind of running around playing and enjoying the day off. While Pam and I are doing other things, maybe cleaning the house or getting some work done. You know, if it's a Saturday, there's a good chance I'm polishing up a sermon. I don't know. But the kids are playing. And after a while, we become aware that it had been a while since we had seen or heard from Grace. Seen Grace? No. All right, well, We'll make sure she's doing okay. So we look in the backyard, she's not in the backyard. We look in her bedroom, she's not in her bedroom. We look in the basement, she's not there. Look at all the places in the house where she usually is. Can't find her. Okay, well, maybe she went next door. We had a family living next door that had a couple of girls that were about her age, just right next door. They played together all the time. So we go next door. Is Grace over here? No. Okay, well, maybe she went the other direction. Right next door is the church, and the back door to the church was always unlocked, and she knew that. Maybe she went to go hang out in the church. No. Okay, well, maybe she went across the alley, because we had a church member, a really good friend, who Finn and Grace would go and visit because she would let them watch as much TV and eat as many cookies as they wanted. Maybe that's where Grace is. Maybe she's gone over to Jeanette's house. So we go across. Is Grace here? No. Okay. Starting to get a little nervous now. So we check in with her other friends whose houses she would go and visit and play. She had a couple of friends from her class that she would frequently go and play with who lived reasonably close to us. Now, they were on the other side of Main Street. And Grace had been told that she was not supposed to cross Main Street without telling us, without us going with her. But maybe that's where she is. So we go over to all of her friends' houses. Is Grace here? No. Really starting to panic now, because every place that we can think where Grace might be, she is not there. And we are calling people, we are going to houses, we are looking everywhere we can think to look. And now it's been well over an hour since we had noticed that she was missing. And we still hadn't found her and had no idea where she might be. And we were just this close to calling the police. Like, that was the level of panic that was going on, right? Because this is absolutely terrifying, parents, right? When you really don't know where, right? Because you lose your kids all the time. But then you go look for them and you find them and it's not a big deal. But when you go look for them and you cannot find them, it is terrifying. It's like you have misplaced one of your own vital organs, right? It is just terrifying. It is sickening. And we are this close to calling the police when we do a last-minute emergency scan of the house, and Grace is napping. She has gone down into the guest bedroom, but instead of falling asleep on the bed like a normal person, she got down into this little crack between the bed and the wall where only a 5-year-old could have possibly fit, and fallen asleep down there, and because she is sleeping so soundly, she has not heard our panicked cries, "Grace! Grace!" She just slept through the whole thing, right there in the basement floor. But it was terrifying. For that maybe hour and a half where we did not know where she was, it was terrifying. It was sickening. Parents, if you have ever experienced that for an hour or two, then you can begin to imagine how freaked out Joseph and Mary must have been come, say, day 2, day 3, day 4 of not knowing where Jesus was. Because Jesus was missing for 4 days. Grace, a little over an hour. Jesus, 4 days. Jesus' family has gone to Jerusalem for the Passover, as they do every year. Right? This is an annual tradition in Jesus' family. They're devout. They worship. They attend the worship at the temple every year. And so just like they do every year, they have gone to the temple for the Passover. And then, when it's done, they get up and leave without realizing that Jesus has been left behind. It's just like that movie Home Alone, right? It's the Christmas season, so there's a fair chance that Home Alone was on TV at some point in the last week, right? You know this story, right? The family oversleeps because the power went out, the alarms don't go off, and so they're all trying to get up and get out to the airport on time, and in their haste to make it to their flight on time, they overlook that one kid has been left at home. That's exactly what Jesus' parents do. They are traveling with a large group that would have included a lot of family, and they just assume that some family member has an eye on Jesus, knows where Jesus is. I mean, you know how this goes, right? When it's holiday season and all the family is in the house, you don't keep keep that careful of attention on your kids. You just kind of let them run around and play with all the cousins and all the siblings because you know that they're here in a place surrounded by family and some adult somewhere knows what's going on. That's what Jesus' family does. They assume that he is with some other family member, and it's about a day after leaving Jerusalem that they realize that he is not, in fact, with them. Panic, right? Terrifying. Where could he be? They go back to Jerusalem and they are searching. They are searching everywhere. 3 days they are looking for him. I can't imagine how terrifying and how stressful that must have been. Right? For 3 days. And in Jerusalem, which in the ancient world, right, Jerusalem is the major metropolitan area. This would be like your kid going missing for 3 days in Los Angeles. Right? I mean, terrifying. Finally, in the grand retracing of their steps, they go back to the temple where they had gone to offer the sacrifice for Passover. They go back to the temple, and there he is, content as can be, sitting among the scribes, the elders, the teachers, asking questions, learning the stories. And Joseph and Mary are not happy. He's in trouble. How could you treat us like this? They say. How could you do this to us? Don't you know how worried we were? Don't you know how stressed we were? And Jesus says to them, didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? That's an interesting choice of words, isn't it? Not didn't you think to look for me where you left me, but didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? I must be in my Father's house. Jesus is basically saying that he didn't have a choice in this matter. For him, it was a necessity, every bit as essential as breathing. I must be in my Father's house. I had to be here. I have to be here. I must be in my Father's house. I'll tell you another story that happened while I was a pastor in the church in Escalon. In the church in Escalon, we had a youth group that was big and it was active. We just happened to have a lot of middle school age kids in that church. And we had one young woman who had started to come to our youth group activities, our youth group meetings very, very regularly. She was almost never in church, but she came to the youth group meetings really regularly. And then one day in youth group, we started to talk about confirmation, because just about everybody who was in youth group was also in confirmation. And she was interested in joining our church's confirmation classes. This young woman was. And so I sat down and I explained to her what confirmation was about, that this was a way of becoming a member of our church, that one of the requirements of getting confirmed is that you need to be coming to church on a regular basis. She said, okay. Now this young woman, her parents were not members of our church, and they almost never came. Their grandparents, her grandparents were members of our church, and so her parents would show up occasionally on the holidays, but her parents were not members of our church, and they still, even as she was going through this confirmation process, they never came. This young woman walked to church every Sunday by herself so that she could attend worship, and then she would stay after church for her confirmation classes. Without any help, without any encouragement from her parents. And they didn't even give her so much as a ride and drop her off at the front door. She walked to church every Sunday in order to attend worship. And when she completed her confirmation class, when she stood up there with the rest of them and got confirmed, there was something really special about her confirmation, right? Because the rest of the kids up there, there was some nudging, maybe some occasional arm twisting on the part of their parents to make sure that they got to confirmation classes and that they showed up. And I want to be on record that I think there is nothing wrong with that, right? Parents, give them the nudge, give them the arm twist, get them into church. I have no problem with that. I hear a lot of people that say, you know, I want my kids to decide for themselves when they grow up. Great. I agree. My kids can decide for themselves when they grow up. In the meantime, they're going to be here. If they make a decision when they grow up, it's going to be a decision to leave the church, not a decision to start coming to the church. And I'll love them and accept them, but in the meantime, they're going to be here. But this young woman in Esseline, she was there all on her own. She chose to be there. And that made her confirmation just so much more special and so much more meaningful. On some level, she knew she had to be in her Father's house. Right? She knew, she could sense that there was something in her life that she needed that she could get here in church. There was something that she wasn't getting in her home or in her school or from her friends, something missing in her life. There was something missing. And she could only get it here in church, and this was where she wanted to be. She wanted to be in God's house. For her, it was a necessity. She didn't have a choice. She needed to be in God's house. You know, kids are kind of like that, right? I think that's interesting. Jesus and this young woman, they were about the same age. The scriptures tell us that Jesus was 12 years old when he abandoned mom and dad in order to stay in the temple. This young woman would have probably been around 13. Maybe this is what Jesus was talking about when he said that those who cannot receive the kingdom of heaven as a child will never receive it. See, the thing about young people is when they are missing love or attention or affection, they feel it acutely. And not only do they feel it, they act on it. Right? They will do what it takes to get attention. And if you aren't giving them the attention that they need, they will act up in order to get your attention. They will misbehave in order to get your attention. Because when young people are not getting the attention, the affection, the love that they need, they feel it, and they feel it acutely, and they will do whatever it takes, whatever they can come up with to try to get it. It seems like as we get older, we almost learn to tolerate this lack of attention or affection or love in our lives, that we get better at tolerating some of those things that we are missing. And I don't know that that's a good thing. I think maybe that's what Jesus was getting at when he talked about needing to receive the kingdom of God as a child. Because as adults, we can just get callous. And we can just get accustomed to not having those things that warm our hearts and make us whole. But that's not the case with kids. Young people, teenagers especially, man, they need that love and attention and the affection. They need it from their families, they need it from their friends, and they need it from God. They need it from church. They need the kind of unconditional love that only God can offer. So many of us, I think, we sense that there is something missing in our lives. Deep down, we sense that there is something missing in our lives. I mean, you go up and you ask adults how happy they are, and usually you'll get an answer somewhere along the lines of, can't complain, pretty good, doing all right. But how often do you get that sort of extravagant, over the top, man, I am great, I am fabulous, and everything is just so fantastic. I feel like a bundle of energy and joy about to explode. It's rare. It's too rare. I think that so many of us, we sense that there is something that is missing in our lives, and the problem for most of us is that we still feel like that even though we know there's something missing in our lives, that we should be the ones who get to define what it is that we're missing. We're not interested in hearing what God has to say on the subject of what it is that we're missing. I have heard it said, and maybe you've heard this too, that each of us has a God-shaped hole in our hearts. You ever heard that expression? A God-shaped hole in our hearts. And you can try to fill that hole with all kinds of things, with everything, and man, people do. They try so desperately to fill in that void when they sense something is missing. But nothing else is going to work because it's a God-shaped hole in our hearts, right? It's like trying to complete a puzzle when you're missing the right piece. There's only one thing that's going to fit, and only one thing that's going to work, and only one thing that is going to make it complete. Sisters and brothers, we are not complete without the love of God. We are not complete without the love of God in our lives. We too must be in God's house. We too must be in God's presence. And we must be following in God's ways if we are going to be happy and complete and content. Young people get this. They do. They might not know exactly what it is that's missing in their lives, but they know that there's something missing. I was just up doing the keynote for the regional youth event, or not the regional, the fall youth event at Placerville Camp, talking to the young people and doing a little bit of research in preparation for that. You know what I found out? I found out that social scientists are telling us that this is the loneliest generation in American history. And that's coming from the kids themselves. They'll tell you in surveys and in studies that they feel loneliness at higher rates than ever before in the history of this country. For the first time in half a century, the suicide rate among teenagers is going back up. It's been declining for 50 years, and now it's going back up. They sense that there is something missing in their lives. And I think what's missing is real connection, right? We've got all these friends on social media, but how many friends do we have in real life, face-to-face, human interaction, where you can hold a hand and get a hug? There's so little connection in real life. It's all mediated through screens. And they need it. They need love and attention and affection. Kids need that stuff. They need it from us. Right? They need it from their parents, they need it from their neighbors, they need it from their families, they need it from their friends, and they need it from their church. And we all need this. Even if we have started to grow accustomed to loneliness, which is itself a whole other problem. Even if we have started to get used to this, we need it. And there are opportunities for it, for younger and older people to connect. You know, there's the mentoring program that we just got started in the school, where older folks and younger folks can form a relationship, an actual, honest-to-God, in-person, face-to-face relationship with one another, based on mutual care and concern. And one of the things that I love about church is that you can have that here. How many places in the world do you get 3 and 4 generations of people together in one room? I mean, you think about that, how often does that happen elsewhere? It's pretty rare. Every Sunday morning it happens here. I think that's beautiful. The way that younger and older people can connect in the church. You know, I'm going to embarrass you. I know that my daughter just sent a card to Lois for Christmas a few days ago, and in that Christmas card she has written that she kind of thinks of Lois as her adopted grandmother. That's pretty special. It is. I don't know many places in the world where you get those kinds of relationships. We need that. We need each other, and we need God. You see, sisters and brothers, we were created by God to live a certain life. We were created to be a particular kind of being. We were created to live a life centered in loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And if we are not living that life, then we will never be truly happy. It is impossible for us to be truly happy if we are not living a life centered in love, because we were created to live a life centered in love. Maybe, if you are honest with yourself, you can admit that maybe there is something missing in your life. Maybe it's something that you can't quite put your finger on, and most of the time you don't even think about it. But it's that little thing that keeps you from saying, if somebody asks, how are you doing? From saying, man, I am doing great, to just saying, I'm doing okay. Maybe there is something that means that you're not feeling complete. Sisters and brothers, in order for us to be complete, in order for us to be content, all of us, young and old, we must be and we must live as God's children. We must follow in God's ways. We must be in God's presence. We must love one another. We must love God. We must be in God's house.